Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. We will continue our discussion on history. Okay, so history for UPSC. We have done a lot of discussions already related to history. We have discussed a lot of questions and a lot of concepts. So today also we are continuing with the same idea, and we will be discussing about the militant nationalism during World War I. Okay, and if you remember, we have already discussed about militant nationalism when we discussed about the partition of Bengal and associated movements. Okay, and after Surat split, there was a first phase of militant nationalism. Okay, I'll discuss that later also. Then we will talk about Komagata Maru incident today itself, 1914, and associated to that we'll discuss about Continuous Passage Act. Okay, so all these are part of militant nationalism. I'll connect everything to militant nationalism, this Khadar party movement which was there during the time of World War I. Okay, and then we will talk about Defense of India Act 1915. And then we will also briefly mention about Zimmermann plan, and all these can be asked as prelims questions. So I'll be focusing on prelims questions. So we will start with militant nationalism during World War I. So I'll give you a brief idea about World War I. I'll not be discussing that in detail here. That we will be discussing in world history anyway. Okay, so we will start. So if you have any doubts related to any of our discussions that we have done so far in history, economy, or quantitative aptitude, you can get in touch with me. So I have created a Telegram channel. You can join that. So this is the Telegram channel, and this is my Instagram ID also. Both are same. So Zia Safir, you can join that. I have shared all the videos in that Telegram channel. Okay, so you can get all the history videos which I have done before. So I'll start with militant nationalism during World War I. Okay, so that's our topic of discussion today. Militant nationalism during World War I. Okay, so this is maybe the second phase of militant nationalism. So the first phase of militant nationalism we have seen during the time of 1908 to 1911 time, and I have told you most prominent among them was Yugantar, and all those things we have already discussed. So after the partition of Bengal, there were Swadeshi movement, and extremists took charge. Extremists were able to pressurize the moderates and went for mass mobilization strategy. Okay, and after 1907, the Surat split. The extremist leaders were actually suppressed. Bal Gangadhar Tilak went to jail, and all those problems were there. So extremists and the masses were left out with leadership. So some of the youth, they started taking bullets and guns, and they wanted to assassinate the unpopular British officials. Okay, with the aim that, or with the hope that if that happens, you can strike fear or terror among the minds of English, and the partition of Bengal may be annulled. But that was a failure. In fact, the objective was to assassinate the unpopular British officials, but they couldn't assassinate any one of them. And after that, but they could obviously strike fear among the minds of English. Okay, and later we have discussed that in 1911 Delhi Darbar, the partition of Bengal annulled. Okay, and all those things we have done. So now militant nationalism, this is the second phase, that is during World War I. And let's quickly discuss about World War I here. I'll discuss this in detail in world history when we discuss about World War I and World War II, and all those things we'll be discussing later. Okay, so it was from 1914 to 1918. So started in 1914. So you basically need to know the impact on India. Okay, so on one side it was German and Ottoman or Turkish Empire. Okay, so on one side, and on the other side British, French, Russia, and later US also joined in 1917, and US later. So this was between 1914 and 18, and there was an agreement in 1919, and actually they have defeated the German and Ottoman. Okay, now the question related to the importance of India, okay, it's actually related to Indian soldiers. Okay, so actually many Indian soldiers were part of British troops. More than 2 lakh of the soldiers in the British troop were Indians. So the major question at that time was related to the role of this Indian soldiers in the British troop, although they are actually paid by the British only. Now you already know that 1914 Tilak was released from jail, and now the question in front of the Indian nationalists is actually whether to support the involvement of Indian troops in the British army in World War One, because we have nothing to do with World War One. You can see here there is no role for India here. It is between British and Germans, British, French, Russia, US, and German and Turkish Empire. So India have no role to play, but most of the army members are actually from India. I've told you 2 lakh is from India. So the question is whether we need to support the involvement of Indian army, Indian troop or Indian force in the World War One. Okay. And finally, what they have decided is they decided that they will support the English during this time because they are facing a crisis at this time. So with the assumption or with the expectation that once the World War One is over, they will repay it back in terms of devolution of power. So we have decided, the moderates or the moderate leaders have decided to support the participation of Indian troops in the World War One. Okay, and the expectation that the British will repay it back in terms of devolution of power. Let me write it down, that one single sentence which concerns our entire discussion here. Okay, so will support in crisis but should be repaid. Okay, now how this is how they are going to repay it in terms of devolution of power after World War One. So they have decided to support in the crisis. See, if the Congress would have made a call that the Indian troops should not participate, then it would have been a big problem. In fact, Congress could have played a very destructive role in World War One if they could have asked the Indian soldiers to resign from the army, or if they called them back. If this would have been done by the Congress, if they are resigning, it could have been very destructive for English. Okay, but they have decided they will support the British in the crisis, because if you are calling them back, there is a possibility that there can be a mutiny among the soldiers. So the moderates at that time decided they will support by expecting devolution of power later. Now when we move towards militant nationalism during World War One, militant nationalism during World War One, what I need to discuss is all about Ghadar party. Okay, so during this time, actually some people started feeling or thinking that there's a great opportunity to militarily overthrow British. Okay, and especially Ghadar party. Ghadar party was formed in USA, actually in San Francisco in 1913, who were the prominent leaders: Lala Hardayal, Barkatullah Khan, Sohan Singh Bakla. Okay, now what was the aim? As I told you, the aim was to instigate a mutiny within the British Indian troops stationed in India and abroad during World War One. Okay, so the aim was basically to instigate a mutiny in the British Indian troops stationed in India and abroad during this crisis, World War One. So they have seen that most of the forces were abroad and the military control in India was very weak. So it is very easy to go for a mutiny here, and you can easily and cheaply militarily overthrow English. So that was the idea. Now you see here they were started in USA. So, and I've told you already, US was part of British. But one thing that you need to understand is not at the beginning. US actually joined later only in 1917 only. US joined with British. So this is an organization which was openly formed. Okay, so there is no US crackdown in the beginning. Later it happened, but in the beginning they were not against this particular organization. Okay, now one important incident that I want to discuss here is Komagata Maru incident 1914. Komagata Maru incident 1914. See, there were large number of migrants to Canada from India, okay, and they not only from India, from Asia, but under British pressure, they have followed certain discriminatory policies so that these people won't enter Canada. So the Canadian government actually went for anti-immigration policy during this time under British pressure, and they actually discriminated the non-whites, okay, and it was very much racially motivated, okay. So this was actually racially motivated, and non-white population discriminated. Okay, they have passed an act which is known as Continuous Passage Act. I'll tell you what is this incident all about, but before that you need to know about this particular act, because Komagata Maru incident is actually connected to this particular act, okay. So Continuous Passage Act 1914. See, under Continuous Passage Act, it's actually any migrants who's coming from some other place are prevented from becoming a legal migrants under certain conditions. So if you are not satisfying certain conditions, there were two conditions. I'll tell you the two conditions. So if you cannot satisfy that two conditions, you cannot be a legal migrant and you will not be allowed to enter in Canada. Okay, so this is basically to disallow the entry by the Asians in Canada. So two conditions are like this. The first condition is actually if you're coming from one place, you have to directly come to Canada. There should not be any stoppage in between. See, normally when you're going from Asia, it takes 60 or more than 60 days. So usually you used to stop at Europe. Okay, so this is, if you have done this, it is very difficult for you to travel from Asian countries. Okay, so it is very difficult to go from Asia to Canada in a stretch, but you have to go in a stretch without any stop. It should be uninterrupted journey. So this itself will tell you that it is basically to promote the Europeans, and it is discrimination against non-whites, okay, against especially Asians. So that means the first is actually it should be an uninterrupted journey from the origin state to the destination. Destination is actually Canada. Second condition is there should be adequate financial balance with you. So these are the conditions which has to be satisfied. Let me write it down. The first condition is that potential migrants coming to Canada must not break their journey and should in a single uninterrupted trip reach the Canadian port. Okay, so this is actually the first provision, that the potential migrants coming to Canada must not break their journey and should in a single uninterrupted trip you have to reach the Canadian port. You cannot stop in between. Second one is minimum financial balance must be available with the potential migrants. So this is also very important clause. The minimum financial balance must be available. Now you can see from these two provisions, it is only to prevent Asians entering, or it is only to prevent the non-whites entering to Canada. Okay, so either in terms of financial balance or keeping the single uninterrupted trip. Okay, basically you used to stop at Europe and then you go to Canada, but that is not possible, especially after this particular clause. Okay, now to satisfy this condition, what happened is from Hong Kong to Vancouver, 320 migrants went, okay, in a continuous uninterrupted trip. It took 55 days Hong Kong to Vancouver in 1914, and it took 55 days, 320 Indian migrants. Okay, so they have reached the port, but they were not allowed to enter the Canadian port. Okay, not allowed. Why they have not allowed? Because see, the thing is that they have satisfied the first condition, that they went in a single uninterrupted trip, but the condition that they have said is this is not satisfied. The financial balance was not satisfied, so they were not allowed to enter. So since they were not allowed, they were forced to return back, and they came to they actually returned to Calcutta. So at Calcutta port they came, and they requested British government to talk for them to the Canadian government. But this went unnecessary firing. The police fired. They didn't talk to the Canadian government, and British firing, 22 people killed. 22 people killed in this. So actually migrants, who reached Calcutta, they refused to get down at Calcutta. Rather, they have asked the British government to talk to Canadian government, but the British government refused, and it resulted in police firing, as they were not ready to get down at the Calcutta port, and 22 people killed. So this is all about the incident. So that is actually gave an indication that the British government is not at all concerned about the problems of Indians, and that created a lot of dissentments and issues in Punjab. Okay, and that actually motivated the Khadar party. So I hope things are clear now. And in fact, in 2015, Canadian PM, the president officially apologized for this particular incident in the 100th year. So this incident, the Komagata Maru incident, actually provoked many Punjabis. Okay, during that time it created anti-British sentiments in Punjab, and Khadar party actually decided to capitalize on this anti-British sentiment, and they tried to instigate a mutiny among the Indian troops which are stationed in Punjab. So the Khadar party tried to instigate a mutiny, but somehow the plan was leaked to the British government, and they passed an act, the Defence Act of India, or Defence of India Act, Defence of India Act 1915, and through this act they were able to, or they have imprisoned many soldiers, many Indian soldiers who planned to instigate mutiny, and many of them were later hanged also. So they actually suppressed this under this Defence of India Act. Okay, so that's about mainly I want to talk about this Khadar party. See, actually under this Defence of India Act, if you have any, if you suspect anyone for instigating mutiny, or if somebody is planning to instigate mutiny, you can actually imprison them. So that under that they have imprisoned many Indian soldiers, and later on they were hanged. Now let's quickly discuss the significance of Khadar party. Okay, significance of Khadar party. So the first one is it failed to achieve. In fact, first I want to talk about the failure, and it was actually a failure. The first phase of militant nationalism was also a failure. This was also a failure because they couldn't achieve their goal. In the first phase of militant nationalism, when you talk about their objective was to assassinate unpopular British officials, but it was a failure. Now here the objective was to militarily overthrow British during the time of crisis, and they planned to instigate a mutiny, but the plan was leaked to the British government, and they passed Defence of India Act, and they were completely suppressed. Okay, so it was again a failure. So failed to achieve its immediate objective. What was that? That is to instigate a mutiny and bring about an armed overthrow of British, or a militarily overthrow British. Okay, so that is the first point that I need to write here. Second point, Khadar party preached nationalism. Khadar party preached nationalism with a secular outlook, and continued to inspire the future generation of revolutionaries. So this is actually revolutionaries, a positive. Okay, now the question is, what is the reason for failure? Why it was a failure? Okay, so reason of failure. See, the reason for failure is they have planned to militarily overthrow British. It's a kind of insurgency. But Lala Hardayal, who was a leader, he himself is a teacher, and he never had, or he hardly had any experience in any kind of armed insurgency. Okay, so that is actually the reason for failure. They didn't had any experience, they don't know how to organize this, and they just decided that they are going to militarily overthrow English, but they don't know what to do for that. Okay, so Lala Hardayal and others had no prior experience in any organized armed insurgency. Lala Hardayal himself was actually a university professor, but Lala Hardayal actually managed to escape. So I have already told you, when US joined in the World War One, actually this Khadar party was suppressed, but Lala Hardayal was managed to escape from US and he reached Germany. Okay, so in Germany he met Zimmermann. So he met Zimmermann. Who was that? The German foreign secretary. He was the foreign secretary. So the Zimmermann actually assured Lala Hardayal that they will provide all the financial assistance, and you go ahead with the plan that militarily overthrow British. Okay, so they offered financial assistance. So Germans will provide all the financial assistance to instigate a mutiny among the Indian troops. So that was the plan, and this plan is what we call as Zimmermann plan. Zimmermann plan. So it is actually having the same plan as that of Khadar party only. So what was the plan of Khadar party? Basically to militarily overthrow the English by instigating a mutiny among the troops. Zimmermann plan is also the same. So Germans will provide the financial assistance to instigate a mutiny among the Indian troops, so that militarily you can overthrow the English and you can actually weaken the English army. That is the objective from the German side. But again, it was leaked to the British government and they have taken a lot of preventive measures, and this Zimmermann plan was also a failure. Okay, so Zimmermann plan as well as Khadar party, their plan was both are failures. So I hope this topic is clear for all of you. Komagata Maru incident. So that has to be there. Firstly, you need to know about the Continuous Passage Act, which is very important. So two provisions you need to know in Continuous Passage Act, that if you need to be a legal migrant in Canada, two conditions has to be satisfied. That you need to go to Canada in an uninterrupted trip. That is the first condition. Second condition is you should have adequate financial balance. And 320 Indians went from Hong Kong to Vancouver, and they took 55 days in an uninterrupted journey. So they satisfied the first condition, but they were not allowed to enter in the Canadian port by saying that the second condition was not actually satisfied, that is a required financial balance. So they were forced to send back, or they were forced to go back to India. And when they came to Calcutta port, they refused to step down over there, and they requested the British government to talk to Canadian government, and that ended in police firing, and 22 Indians actually died, and that created a lot of sentiments and dissentments among the Punjabis and in Punjab, and that was taken as an opportunity by the Khadar party, and they tried to instigate a mutiny, but it was a failure, and the Khadar party was totally suppressed. And after that, Lala Hardayal was managed to escape from US to Germany, and he met Zimmermann over there, who was the foreign secretary of Germany, and he assured that he will give the financial assistance to instigate a mutiny among the Indian troops to weaken the British army. So Zimmermann plan and Khadar party objective both are same, but that was also leaked to the British government, and it was again a failure. So both were failures. So I hope this topic is clear for you, both from prelims as well as from mains point of view. If you have any doubt, you can get in touch with me. This is my Instagram ID, and the same as my Telegram channel. I have started this Telegram channel only to share those videos. Okay, hello everyone.